Welcome to the DNX Podcast, the number one resource for entrepreneurs, nomads, and impact-driven souls. And I am your coach, Sylvia Christman. Welcome back, everyone. I'm really excited that we're here today with my two friends, Caleb Spalding and Levina Lee. They are a couple and the co-creators of the Sex Journal. So welcome, guys. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Hey, Sylvia. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, so I've known you two actually for quite some time. And so I got to witness the journey of the Sex Journal. And yes, I've always been really intrigued by it because I loved listening to the two of you share how you two really created an environment for connection and intimacy and share a different form of freedom and joy with each other. So I was really excited to hear when you launched your Sex Journal, and I wanted to have you here on the podcast because I think everybody listening would want to hear your story, your journey, and of course what the Sex Journal is all about. So why don't we start by how came this about? And like what led you here to where you are today?
Yeah, so Levina and I have been dating for almost exactly a year and 2 days from now will be a year. And very early on in that relationship, we realized that we were having amazing sex. And as the true entrepreneurs and data miners that we are, we really wanted to get to the bottom of it. We wanted to know what was making this sex that we were having so incredible. So we're also avid journalers, and we decided to pull a moleskin off of Levina's shelf one day and just write down what was coming up, what came up for us after having sex. And it was a shared journal, and we were just writing. We thought that we could write down variables like, oh, we haven't eaten lunch yet today, or we had a lot of caffeine this morning, or we didn't sleep last night, and figure out like what the variables were that make for great sex. But what we realized very quickly was that there's a lot to uncover that came out immediately from past experiences, from fears, from insecurities. And this journal, a sex journal for couples, created a space for us to go into that and actually explore all these things from our life that can really make for great sex.
That's amazing. Did you think this was something that came natural to you, or did you have hesitations to be transparent with each other?
I think, Sylvia, it's really fun to get to share this with you because you've known us, I think, before we were together, and then as we became a couple. So
yeah. I know you guys as friends.
Yeah. So you've seen our individual journeys, and I think for a long time we've both spent the last few years getting to a point where we felt comfortable being really open and honest about who we are and what we want and what we think about the world. And with anything, I think being vulnerable in a relationship can be confronting. So when we first started journaling, I think we didn't realize how much we were going to divulge about ourselves, but in reflecting about our sex and intimacy, like naturally things came up. Had we known how vulnerable it was going to get, maybe we'd have slowed down a little bit, but we just didn't know. We honestly just didn't know. But what made our relationship very special from the beginning was that we were willing to take these leaps with each other. And as things came up, we just practiced sitting with whatever stories or desires or fears we were about to share. Sometimes it would take like 5 or 10 minutes to read an entry to each other because of how nervous we were. But we always wanted to be totally transparent.
Why was it so difficult to be actually that transparent? What is it that comes up?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I had no experience really talking about sex before we started doing this. in my family growing up, I got my first sex conversation from my mom when I was 23. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, and it really wasn't a very long conversation. She was like, "Are you having sex?" Ah, and ran off. So I think, there's a lot, and outside of my family, I grew up in New York City, which has really great sex education standards compared to the rest of the country, and yet still what I got in practice was pretty limited. So I think I had a lot of fear. It always felt like a very taboo topic. And I had never really tried to have an open conversation with a partner before. It just didn't even cross my mind that was possible. So we were very much stepping into unknown territory. And I think sex is such a personal thing that not only requires us to be physically naked, but sometimes really emotionally naked as well. Yeah.
And I think it allows us to create. We really had to create Levina touched on this. We had to create our own language tools within our relationship, and having the space, having a sex journal available to us allowed that space to develop those tools and that communication between the two of us inside of our relationship. So it was really like constant growth. It still is. We're still learning things about ourselves and about each other. And I think those things are always going to be changing, as they will for any human being, whether you're in one consistent relationship or if you're dating casually or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. You know what I thought was so interesting to me watching you guys share about your journaling, and when you told me about it, is that even for people like myself or many of the people listening, we grew up in Germany and other places in the world where sex education might be more prominent, or exposure to it might be more prominent and not so repressed. But even for me, I just thought there was a deep layer of vulnerability that I don't think anybody really encourages, a brave conversation around intimacy, need, desire, and with that, creating a space that feels free of shame. Right? That was what I got from the two of you when I started listening to you sharing your journal habits and what it's really done for your relationship. And, how has that decreased the different layers of shame that you may have had before?
Yeah. I think what was really extraordinary about keeping a sex journal in the very beginning of our relationship is that it gave us the opportunity to tap into things that we had personally not really acknowledged before. And that was everything from upbringing to body image to having a voice, feeling comfortable asking for certain things or sharing reflections. I think in having a journal, we got to have the space to reflect on our own and then share those reflections with each other. And I think something really beautiful about what you're pointing out about this space for vulnerability and different cultural contexts in relationship to sex and sex education is that, sure, we had a lot of stuff to work through in the beginning of our relationship. And once we did, having this space to be really vulnerable is not just about the hard stuff. It's not just about the deep work. It's actually also about having a lot of fun and being really open about how we're feeling and what we want and what we want to experiment with and what we want to play with. Vulnerability comes in all sorts of shapes and forms. So I think I just really want to call out that there's also a lot of fun involved.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell me more.
It's such a journey, it's it feels, I think if I reflect back on like past sexual experiences, I think it can feel very isolating, because it's very easy for me to be in my own head, and to be wondering whether I'm doing the right thing, if my partner likes it, if I could be better, and have all these like questions of doubt constantly circling my mind. I think that by writing this stuff down and actually sharing it with Levina, with my partner, allowed us to go on a journey together. And that journey definitely had some and will continue to have some bumps. And it allows us to celebrate together, and allows me to kind of knock away some of the built up residue that's been built up in my mind of doubt and questioning and fears and all these things, and make space for just like infinite possibility.
What's the most fun thing that you guys have tried?
I think it's what. So one thing that I think is super interesting is what comes up in a sex journal, in the sex journal between us, extends beyond our bedroom or the confines of the space that we're having sex in. So I think we still are experimenting a lot with different things inside of our physical sex. But outside, one really fun thing that I think has come up is just like a lot of playfulness. So we went from like honestly being pretty nervous to say the word sex even in our relationship to like now Caleb sometimes in the middle of the workday will be like running around doing a bunch of things, and then I'll turn around and he'll be mooning me in the middle of the house. Just like, hello, here's my body. And I think it's just like this, however it manifests, it's just this level of permission and acceptance that we have for each other that lets us play.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like we are children a lot of the time. And in a really fun way. Like I feel like we are just on a playground constantly. And I don't just mean that sexually. I mean like Levina said, just in our relationship and everything we do, there's just like this extra level of fun that we have baked into our day to day together. And I guess like, I think that has come from us journaling about our sex, because we have like, we're not necessarily like the most crazy out there couple when it comes to like trying these ridiculous and, outrageous sexual conquests and pursuits, but we just have this playground that we've created, and it's really special to see how far it actually extends. It's so much fun. It's ours. It's unique to Levina and I, and it really has like grown out of journal pages.
Can you share a couple of exercises that people could just use on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so let's see. In a sex journal for couples, the first portion of the journal is full of exercises and resources about communication. I think one very simple one that we offer in the journal and in our events is a very, very easy journaling exercise. So one of the prompts that we start with is just, what is your relationship to sexuality today? Or how are you feeling about your sexuality today? And what we suggest is take a piece of paper, set a timer for about 3.5 minutes, and just reflect whatever is coming up for you emotionally, physically, explore. And the intention of this exercise isn't to necessarily understand why you're feeling what you're feeling, but rather to get in touch with what you're feeling. And at the end of that timer, we have partners read their entry out loud to each other. And we usually find that opens up the space to talk about some stuff that's been in the space of the relationship, that's present for the day, wants and desires for the future. It's just an opportunity to get a lens into the other person's experience.
And I think what's so important and amazing about that exercise, and then this is the same format that we use for the journaling itself too, in the actual meat of the journal, is by writing solo first, we're really prompting you to write as if you're not going to be sharing, because there's a lot of power in being really vulnerable on a piece of paper and then having the opportunity to read it out loud to someone from a place of like total openness. It just really opens up a lot of conversation and a lot of freedom too. We have done events where people have had some nerves in like writing down because they know they're going to be sharing with somebody. So I think a really important element to keep in mind with this is to, not write as if you're going to be sharing, but write for yourself first and foremost. Like write what's actually coming up for you, and then sharing that openly and vulnerably with whoever your partner is. I think that's what really opens up this like vulnerable and adventurous space.
What has been one of the most awkward things between the two of you so far?
Man, that's a good question. I think there have been a couple things, at least from my end, that have come up around like performance. And I think my experience in the past has been, and I kind of touched on this earlier, wanting to really please my partner and show up in a way that is exactly what she wants. Like there's this image that I'm supposed to be, I'm performing, and I think that's based off of pop culture and porn and all these things that we've been subjected to all that I've been subjected to in my life. And realizing that I wasn't meeting those expectations necessarily. I was like falling short in some regards, or so I thought. And sharing that with Levina, being like, hey, I don't feel like I'm up to snuff. I don't feel like I am totally meeting you where you need me. Was really hard for me to share with her. And what I got from that was she was so gracious and open, just like and sharing with me that the way that I was being, the way that I showed up for her was actually perfect and was exactly what she wanted and needed. And that created such a sense of relief for me, but was such a hard thing to build up to.
For me, the first thing that comes to mind actually like happened very early on in our journaling in our relationship. I've been on this planet for a couple of decades. Like, I'd like to think that I have a sense of what I'm doing and kind of know my way around sex and my partner's body. But in our very first journal entry, so to clarify in case it wasn't clear, the format of a sex journal for couples is that each partner has a space to self-reflect, and we provide prompts for that and the space to do that in the shared journal. And after each person reflects, you read your entries out loud to each other. So we actually pulled up our very first journal and took a look back to see how far we've come. And in that first entry, I wrote first and I was glowing. I was like, oh my God, we just had this wonderful connected experience and it was so lovely. And I think I really did a great job. And Caleb's entry, I'm not going to name specific body parts, but Caleb's entry was, I really don't like having my bleep touched so much. I really like it more if this part of my body didn't get so much attention. I felt not so great about that. And I should have known, because when we sat down to journal, he was like, you're sure I can write anything at all? And I was like, yeah, totally, great. Like, write whatever you want. And when he read that to me, I got so red in the face. I was like, Oh my God. Okay. Okay. And that has just been, I think that experience really sparked a lot of my interest in keeping the journal. I really realized that as great as something can feel on one side, or as great as something might feel after the fact, there are a lot of specific feelings and experiences, whether emotional or physical, that come up in the middle of sex. And to just have the opportunity to look at that is really illuminating.
So how do you safeguard that kind of experience and conversation? Because obviously there's some deeply rooted shame triggers that can come up when you have that level of transparency.
Yeah.
And like, how do you safeguard people using the the sex journal so that they don't end up getting in a fight or get defensive?
Yeah. So that was something that we, I think, discovered very early on. When we first started keeping a sex journal, we shared the exact format we were using with almost anyone who asked. I mean, pretty much anyone who was interested in what we were doing, we gave everything we had to and said, please go do this. It's really wonderful. And no one took us up on that. No one actually started doing it. And what we discovered along the way was exactly that. It's not just about having the tactical bits of how do you keep a sex journal, but there are a lot of tools and resources that are needed in order to truly have this kind of supportive communication. So that's why the first quarter of the journal is full of tips and examples and communication exercises and resources and intention setting. And that's all so that any person who wants to have these kinds of conversations can really feel equipped to share how they feel and receive how their partner feels.
Really about agreement. It's like we create a contract, more or less, that if you're journaling, if you're doing this together, we set up enough of a space that you have the practice. That it's important to be speaking from the I perspective and not offering advice, but just owning your own experience, and not correcting people, not making people wrong. We really focus a lot on that in the intro to a sex journal, so that it is safe, because that, I think, is a very important element to this. It could be very triggering and traumatizing to bring some of these things up. And certainly there have been some things that have come up between Levina and I that we've really had to work through, and spend more time on. But we know, because we've agreed to this framework and agree that we're going to be safe within this container, that we're only doing it. We're on the same team. We're here for each other and not trying to make the other person wrong in any of the things that come up.
Yeah, I think it's a constant journey and a constant evolution. Just because we've provided these resources and these tools doesn't mean that, I think it's really important to highlight, just because we've provided these resources and these tools doesn't mean that the first time you journal or the first 10 times you journal, everything is going to be smooth sailing. We're human beings and we're in conversation with another human being. So things are going to happen and things are going to come up that are unexpected. And along the way, keeping in mind that you're on the same team. There is no win or lose. There's no win-lose. There's only you're winning together or you're losing together. Keeping that in mind and just continuing to practice some of the listening tools that we provide and some of the sharing tools that we provide, I think have really opened up supportive space for the couples that we've shared the journal with so far.
I can't wait to use it. I know that you had shared some little bits and pieces with me in the past. So now I'm really excited to see the whole thing and actually walk through it. So where can people find this?
People can find us at asexjournal.com. We're at a sex journal on all social media. Follow along, stay in touch. We're offering the first run of books very soon, so you'll be able to find us there.
That's amazing. So guys, if you're listening to this, if you're curious about it, follow these guys on Instagram, follow along on their journey. I've had the privilege to be friends with these two, so I've found it incredibly inspiring, and I know that you guys will too. And when you get a chance, go to their website and order one of their books when it's available. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Sylvia.
So much, Sylvia.
That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your ongoing support. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Please go check out dnxcommunity.com. This is where you'll find the other nomads and evaders of convention. We'll see you there. And if you're interested in our English-speaking events, go and check out dnxglobal.com. You'll find the link below this podcast as well. And if you have time, one last favor, please go to iTunes, look for Sylvia Chrisman or look for the DNX podcast and leave a review. Thank you so much, lovely people, and I'll talk to you next time.